Hello and welcome to Leaving Nothing Undared, a podcast from Oblate School of Theology's Department of Continuing Education, where we engage in bold and daring questions shaping the future of our faith. I'm your host, Antonio Frietze, and today we have a very special guest, Dr. Massimo Faggioli. Dr. Faggioli is a professor of historical theology at Villanova University, and he's a globally recognized expert on themes such as Vatican II, the papacy, and the evolving landscape of the global church. His work has been published in more than 10 languages, and he's deeply engaged in conversations on the church's role in a rapidly changing world. He'll be delivering our upcoming Louis G. Vance Lecture on Systematic Theology, entitled Theology, Synodality, and the Rise of Global Catholicism. The Vance Lecture is an annual event here at OST dedicated to exploring major theological questions that shape the church today. It's a space where we bring together leading voices to discuss topics that challenge, inspire, and expand our understanding of the faith. This year, Dr. Faggioli will examine how the church's growing global reality intersects with Pope Francis's call for a synodal church, one that listens, discerns, and moves forward together. So let us move forward together and dive in. All right, Dr. Faggioli, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure.
Absolutely. You came very highly recommended by Dr. Ken Hannon, our professor of systematic theology here and holder of the Louis G. Vance Chair. So at his recommendation, I'm very excited to have this conversation. And I would like to start off really by getting the opportunity to know you through the question of what attracted you to theology as a discipline. You know, it's not something that every young Italian boy dreams of getting into as he grows up. So I'm very curious what drew you to the field and what your experience was over the course of your life, realizing your work in it.
Sure. Thank you again for having me. So it's a fairly typical environment in which I grew up in Italy. It was a fairly secular public school, but at the same time, I was a member of our parish, and in my teenage years, and then when I was in college, I was very active in the largest Catholic youth organization in Italy, which is the Catholic Boy Scouts, and I became one of the group leaders when I was a freshman at the University of Bologna. And because we didn't have the steady presence of a priest as our spiritual assistant, I had to do catechesis for these young boys and girls. And that attracted me to this idea of education in the faith, educations as members of the church, as members of the community, as human beings, as citizens of our own country, but of the world. And so that attracted me into theology, meeting important professors at the University of Bologna. And in my ecclesial conversations in my hometown, Ferrara, North Italy, but also in other places that are important for Italian Catholicism, some schools, other universities, or monasteries. And so it's been a mix of a personal, spiritual discovery and of intellectual excitement for this incredibly rich field, which is theology, history, law, philosophy, political science, all of that. That's in a nutshell how I came to become a church historian and a theologian.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. You
Thank
know,
you.
I am astounded by how your personal experience tracks wider changes that we see in the church, right? That's very poignant. You note that this kind of, at times, an absence of a parish priest drove this need for greater lay involvement in education and catechesis. And so it's very poignant that global kind of trends in the church affect individuals' experience on the ground. And one of the global trends that you talk about or that you refer to in the upcoming lecture is this rise of a global Catholicism and a more globally minded and inspirited church. So I'm wondering if you could define for us or describe in greater detail beyond the numbers and necessarily demographic figures, what do you mean by global church or global Catholicism?
Thank you for your question because this book came out a few months ago, and we've been talking about this, my colleague and I. And so, Catholicism, the very word Catholic means universal. So, in some sense, I mean, the church, I mean, Catholicism have always been global, but much more in theory or global in the sense of a present everywhere, but coming from a particular matrix, which was the European matrix. This is no longer true. So this starts changing already in the 19th century because the missions become local churches in their own right. And so that begins in the 19th century, the 20th century. The 21st century is the beginning of the third millennium in the sense that now it's more and more clear that the future of the church cannot really count on the European matrix in the same way it did for the previous 18 centuries or 19 centuries. So now there are local churches that are no longer missionary churches because the entire church is missionary first. And second, local churches, they are churches that are there not just as a practical expansion of Catholicism that has to be everywhere, but because we understand now that the Catholic character of the Catholic Church or its Catholicity is grounded in the acceptance of the diversity of all different cultures that can and must be part of a Catholic idea of God's word being received in history, right? And so it's a big transition, and it's not just a matter of where the demographic future of the church is. I mean, clearly, much more in Africa or in Asia or in Latin America than in Europe. But there's also a shifting sense of where the future of the church is, not just geographically, I mean, in what areas of the church, but also in what kind of people. And so this is one transition from a clerical church to a church that will continue to have the clergy because we need that for our sacramental life, but is not sustained only by the clergy anymore. So this is a big change that has to do with the global character of the church, and it's a complicated process because it's changing some expectations, some mindsets that have been really cemented by many centuries of history, but now there's a clear, I mean, trajectory that we have to walk and to make the best of that.
Mm. And what's really powerful for me in what you're sharing is the material reality of the change in things like church structures from missions to local parishes and how it's reflective of this. Again, I mean, somewhat theoretical, but in a very real way, our manner of engaging with one another, our manner of praying with one another, and our identity across a global context rather than kind of rooted or based or even necessarily limited to a European context. And to make that, really connected to the experience of the community in San Antonio, where you'll be coming to deliver this Vance lecture, one of the things that we're really known for is the mission system in San Antonio that was the emergence of Catholicism in the area and has now been declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And that kind of transition from missionary planted kind of buildings to then parishes, and even now in some ways historical and secular sites of cultural heritage and preservation bears real significant indicators of the direction that the church is going in. I know that, for example, you do a lot of work in theology. Many of your peers work in theology. I'm curious, you've noted the kind of ecclesial or ecclesiastical changes that this is indicative of. What impact is this having on how we do theology, or the trends that you're seeing emerge in basically how the church theorizes of itself through theology?
Sure. So this is having a big impact on the way we do theology, because I think we are exiting a certain model, which was the model of the 19th or 20th century, where theology was seen almost exclusively as an academic discipline for specialists who are not supposed to engage too much with the ecclesial dimension. They work in their kind of lab and with their method and so on, and the church is strong enough to do their work, I mean, separately, right? Now, theology, both theology in universities and in academia and the church, they need each other more now, I think, because both of them have to face tough questions that have to do with uh, new cultural, social challenges. And I think that both theology and the church in the parishes and dioceses, they cannot solve these problems by themselves. And so they need to talk to each other. For theology, this means that, I mean, academic jargon or expectations from reality that have sometimes little to do with reality, they can improve their impact on our work, and on our understanding of what we talk about through a closer connection with the real church, meaning that we'll keep our methods separate, but there should be more collaboration and more empathy, I would say, from both sides. And so that's been my work in these last few years. I wrote something about that, but also it's the spirit in which I do my work that has changed me from my early years when it was more steeped into a 20th century kind of model. And now I think that the whole situation locally, nationally in the United States, but also in the whole world, call for more collaboration between theology and the church as such, meaning hierarchy, meaning missionaries, meaning catechists, meaning lay people, all of it. And I think that would be a great benefit for both of these different entities.
Absolutely. And what I'm hearing you point to across your questions is, again, the kind of shift in gravity in the church from Europe to South America to Africa to these different communities that have been historically the kind of center and power of the church, as well as this deepening partnership actually between the theologians in the church as well as the ecclesia, or the institutional body of the church. I'm hearing a lot of, words like dialogue, discourse, cooperation, partnership. And I think that that naturally drives our conversation to talk about that kind of second word in the title of your lecture, synodality, right? Can you speak to me a bit about what is it that Pope Francis is calling us to do with this call for a synodal church? And then particularly, is synodality likely to be something that is a monumental quick change, or are we at the beginning of something that is going to take much longer than you or I might live to see the fulfillment of?
So I think that what Pope Francis opened with the synodal process in 2021, but something that he started talking early after his election, is really part of the process of the reception of the Second Vatican Council. It is rooted, this idea of a church that leaves behind the imperial monarchical vestiges to become more a communion. It's really a Vatican II idea. And so here it's a call for both a reform of some structures, of some procedures, canon law, and all that, but it's more fundamentally and more challenge for us. It's a process of conversion and of cultural change. A church where, I mean, some dynamics of understanding authority and power and role are more shaped by the gospel than by our political narratives. So this, and I'm coming here to the second part of the question. So we have seen with Pope Francis an acceleration of this, a deepening, a very intense moment or series of moments, but this is just the beginning. So this is not an event like Vatican II that in a few years really catalyzed the energy for half a century or more. This is different. So this requires more local sensibilities to be involved in how to do synodality. In my impression, I mean, sometimes it's much better to do the synodal stuff without using the word, which can be scary for some people or too complicated. And so in some sense, we are already a synodal church, but we need to continue and challenge some very hard points that are on horizon, and they're no longer my agenda or the agenda of this or that group, but they are become really big issues that we cannot avoid anymore. One of them, surely, the role of women in the church. I mean, this is clearly on the table, and also Pope Francis has talked openly about this. So it's a long process that just started, and I don't think that we will see the end of it, but we have seen some results already. I mean, this is something that is discernible and is visible in different ways, because I mean, being synodal in the US will be different than being synodal in India or in Indonesia or in Africa, and within the US, I mean, some areas need a certain kind of synodality because they're more secularized and so on. Other areas, other models, other spirits. So it's happening, and we just need to be open to this process of conversion and of cultural change.
Absolutely. And one of the things I want to retrieve from that answer that I feel is so precious is this mention of doing synodality without necessarily using the word, and the empowering realization that that's possible, in part because it is something that we have been doing in many ways through church history, right? Before and after Vatican II. And one of the things that I think is important to note about that is this is very much in line with the kind of gospel mandate toward continuous conversion, and is not exactly, Pope Francis introducing something from somewhere else, or, inventing out of whole cloth, maybe pouring new wine into old wineskins or something like that. No, it sounds like from your description, something that has been with us since Christ's first call, that we engage in this metanoia and kind of turning ourselves away from maybe the scripts that dominate so much of the other areas of our lives, and seeing again the image and likeness of God in the person across from us with whom we share our parish and indeed our church. Is there one thing that you would really hope the audience takes away from this upcoming Vance lecture?
If there's one, that we are all theologians in our own right, in different ways. I mean, some of us, I mean, like myself, are professional theologians, but every parent, every godparent, every grandparent, every friend is called to be a testimonial Catholic these days, a believer who's a witness to their faith. And so that means being a theologian. And so that calls specialists to understand their role in a different way. I mean, not talking only to their colleagues, but to their own church, to their own people, as they are a different kind of colleagues in the theological profession. That's my idea that I hope I will be able to convey and explain in this lecture which I'm very excited to give in April in San Antonio.
Absolutely. And we're so excited to have you. Thank you. That was a beautiful conversation. I appreciate it very much. Now, one more question. We do try to end on a lighthearted note and as an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. You know, given that you're at Villanova, you're in Philadelphia, I understand a pretty momentous event occurred a little recently. How did you spend your Super Bowl Sunday, if you don't mind me asking?
You know, we do sports in our family. We don't watch sports. So, but we hear a lot in our parish because our parish is a big Eagles Catholic parish and so on. So we have become part of this, and what can I say? I mean, go Birds.
Thank you very much, Dr. Faggioli. I so much appreciate this conversation and so excited for you to come and join us in April. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
For those interested, Dr. Faggioli will be delivering the Louis G. Vance Lecture on Systematic Theology entitled Theology, Synodality, and the Rise of Global Catholicism on April 10th at 7 p.m. here on campus at OST. It's a free event, available both in person and online via Zoom, so please feel free to join us from anywhere in the world. You can register by visiting our website, ost.edu, and whether you attend in person or online, we pray that you'll be part of this important conversation. Thank you again for tuning in to Leaving Nothing Undared. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe and stay connected for future bold discussions on faith and theology. Until next time, keep seeking, questioning, and leaving nothing undared for the gospel. God bless you.